Before we start today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. The content in this podcast is for general reference and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be complete or exhaustive or to be applicable to any specific individual's medical condition. No information provided in this podcast constitutes medical advice and is not an attempt to practice medicine or to provide specific medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please do not rely on this podcast for emergency medical treatment. Remember that everyone is different, so make sure you consult your own healthcare professional before seeking any new treatment and before you alter, suspend, or initiate a new change in your routine. Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets,
two internal medicine doctors who spent years practicing traditional primary care. Over time, we realized something was missing from modern healthcare. A real understanding of how everyday lifestyle choices impact overall health.
We'll help you cut through the noise of the countless health influencers and their conflicting opinions, because no matter who you follow, the basics of lifestyle medicine are at the heart of it all.
Welcome back to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets.
Well, hopefully you're feeling more confident about tackling summer with your kids after last week's episode with Sarah O'Leary. And today we are shifting focus to sleep.
Let's talk about sleep, baby. I've been really excited to do these shows. I've been holding on to that one, Kitty. I'm really excited to talk about sleep because I do not think specifically there's enough information for people to actually understand how to improve their sleep if they're struggling with it, as well as our society has really downplayed the importance of sleep over the years. And we're learning more and more about the importance of sleep. And that's what we want to focus on today, is why sleep is so critical to our overall health. And it's not something we need to be cheating ourselves from if possible.
Yeah. And we're going to go through not only why sleep is important for your brain, but how it affects all the other systems in your body. And then some things you might be doing in your lifestyle that could be harming your sleep or not letting you get the quality of sleep that you want. So we're going to go through that today, Sarah and I. And then next week, we are very excited to have sleep psychologist Dr. Ryan Wetzler on the show to talk with us a little bit more about how our circadian clock works and then how to deal with insomnia, whether you are someone that has trouble falling asleep or you're someone that wakes up frequently throughout the night and has trouble getting back to sleep. I know he's going to give us a lot of great tips on how to adjust things to improve that.
And then following that, our third show is going to be with Dr. Lauren Whitehurst from the University of Kentucky. And she's going to give us some details about what's happening in our brain during sleep and how we can sleep to optimize our learning and memory, as well as just talk about some of the research she's done related to sleep. She is just a wealth of knowledge, and we are so excited to have her as a guest as well.
We spend about a third of our life sleeping, and if this weren't beneficial to us, we would have stopped doing it a long time ago.
I know. One time I heard that and I was like, that is such a good point. And not only humans, but animals have to sleep. Like, sleep is critical for all living beings.
Our society has put such an emphasis on getting things done, and I have been guilty of this too. You think about whether your day was a good day as if you were productive and how many things you got checked off of your to-do list that day. And we don't really take the time to think about, did we get appropriate rest and let our body reset?
Yeah, and reflecting on my own life of when I've had bad sleep versus good sleep and seeing the impact it had on my overall health and mood and just capabilities, it's made me fall in love with learning more about sleep, just because I, again, didn't learn a whole lot about the details of sleep in medical school to the extent that I know now. And it's just really important to get quality sleep, and it should be emphasized as much as possible. Unfortunately, most Americans don't get enough sleep. We know that the average American sleeps less than 7 hours a night, and 37% of young adults are sleeping less than 7 hours as well. So it's not just something as we're older, it's something that starts at a younger age that we're just not getting enough sleep.
And so we really have to switch our mindset from sleep being a waste of time, or you hear people say, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. If you have that mindset, actually, you won't live as long. So you really need to think about sleep as part of your health plan. And we're going to go through why that's so important as far as all the different systems in your body that are affected positively and negatively depending on your sleep.
One of those statistics that just wraps it up overall is just talking about if you have a sleep disorder, so something that's impacting the amount or quality of sleep that you have, it increases your risk of mortality by 1.5 times. That's significant, and that's only because it impacted your sleep. So it shows how critical it is for your overall health, no matter what condition. It helps us, and we need to sleep for our health.
And I think we as doctors do a particularly bad job at bringing this up because as part of our profession, it's a rite of passage to not sleep. In residency, we would have 30-hour shifts, and when your fellow residents came in the morning after you've been there all day and all night, it was like you were proud. You were like, oh no, I didn't get any sleep. I didn't get to lay down in the call room. I got paged all night long. And we kind of look at that as, wow, you're a hard worker. You're doing a good job. And so when we don't prioritize it for ourselves, then I think we're not as good about bringing it up to patients.
I totally agree with that. And that's something that I've adjusted myself and have reaped the benefits of that, I truly believe. Before we continue, just to put it out there, I know we talked about this on early shows, but when we're talking about optimal amount of time of sleep, ideally, it's not the exact same for everyone, but usually people fall in a range of 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I actually knew this amount of time, and I could have gotten this multiple choice question correct. But what I did is I figured out, I feel like I'm okay enough if I get that 5 to 6 hours of sleep, and I still could do my job and make everything happen. If I'm getting that amount, you cheat from your sleep to get other things done. And for many years was functioning on that lower amount. Even though I knew that was not enough, I felt like that was enough to function. And truly, it was not helping me at all because it was probably causing some of the problems that I may have been experiencing, and I didn't even realize it and connect it to the lack of sleep.
Yeah, I'm the exact same because I thought if 5.5 to 6 hours was where I could function, still do well at work, still function in my home. And I did that for so many years that it wasn't until I really dove into lifestyle medicine and learned all this stuff about sleep and thought, oh my gosh, I have to get more sleep. And I changed to now getting 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep at night. And I cannot believe the difference I see in so many different aspects of my life. So Sarah and I will give you some examples of things we've noticed once we made sleep a bigger priority for ourselves, and hopefully you can see these things in your own life.
Before we jump into some of those effects of poor sleep, we just wanted to mention overall, when we talk about sleep and we talk about the different cycles of sleep, there's two main categories, REM and non-REM. And this consists of stages of light sleep, deep sleep. I think this terminology is more common that people use because we have all these sleep trackers. I wear one. But we, in general, still may not know what to do with that information. We're not going into detail about this today. This is something that we're really going to wait and talk about on one of our later shows. But know that it's coming, and please tune in for that because I know that's a topic that many people are curious about since we have all this data. And then now we don't even know what to do with the data.
And I think the important thing to note, too, is that all of those cycles are important. You get specific benefits from each of them. We need all of them to function well. You cycle through those stages about every 90 minutes, but the amount that you spend in that non-REM light sleep or deep sleep versus that REM sleep changes throughout the night. So that's why it's important to get a full night's sleep because you really need the right percentages of all of those for a whole night to be getting the best benefits you can.
And sleep, again, is personalized, just like everything in medicine. So if you start comparing your data to someone else's, it's going to look different. And it's important to know that as well.
Yeah, I know. I do well at 7.5. I prefer my husband when he's had more in the 8 to 9 range because he just needs more sleep than I do.
Yes, and it's good to know that about yourself. I know that I'm like you, Kitty. I'm more of 7.5 is like golden, but I never really need more than 8. At that point, I feel worse sometimes if I sleep more than that. Now, today we're going to talk about the different aspects of how sleep impacts our health. And to do that, we're just going to go through some systems. And the one that has just really had so much research more recently come out, it's always been there, but I feel like we're just starting to pick up more and more about this, is the impact of sleep in our nervous system and when we talk about different neurological conditions.
That's probably one of the more obvious ones people think about when you think about sleep. You think about your brain, and it's vital to get sleep for memory consolidation. So if you are trying to learn everything you've learned during the day, I saw this analogy one time and I thought this was great, but it's like hitting the save button on your computer of everything you learned during the day, because you need that time at night for your brain to actually make those connections and then to make associations of that new information that you've learned to other things that you already know so that you can recall it when you need to.
It also gives you time to get rid of that excess information from the day, like what I ate maybe for lunch a few days ago, right? We don't need to store that forever. So it is a time for our brain to do its processing. So if we don't give it that time, it's really going to struggle to do that.
Another thing you might hear about the nervous system is that sleep is essential for your neuroplasticity. And really what that means is being able to apply the things that you know, the memories, the knowledge that you have, and be able to problem solve so that when you are somewhere and you are faced with a situation that maybe you haven't been in before, you can draw on the things that you know and actually figure out a way to solve that.
I think from anyone who has struggled with sleep has experienced that before. I know many times when I have not had good sleep and I'm trying to problem solve or think of something quickly or just do something that's new and not just routine, it is so much harder when I have not had a good night's rest versus when I have good sleep. It's incredible to reflect on those two.
Yeah, even just thinking about my 5.5 hour sleep phase of my life, I could do the things, I could think through the things, but the amount of energy it took for me to do that is much greater than it is when I can sleep for 7.5 hours.
Absolutely.
The other thing that's been a newer discovery is the lymphatic system. And you've probably heard, and I think we've mentioned the lymphatic system in your body, which is a system that helps remove waste, and your brain has its own version of this. And we hadn't been able to really visualize it until the last few years. But the lymphatic system is a system where at night, your brain cells actually shrink slightly. And so your cerebral spinal fluid can basically go around and clean everything up. You can think about it as the city goes to sleep and the street cleaners and the garbage men come through and clean that debris. That's what's happening in your brain at night.
And we've seen this in some of the literature about recovering from a traumatic brain injury, that sleep after the fact is something that's going to help you have better outcomes if you're getting good quality sleep.
Yeah, if you think about if you sprain your wrist, you're going to rest your wrist, you're going to brace it. But how your brain rests and recovers is with sleep. So it's so important when you are recovering from anything to make sure that you're getting good quality sleep.
We now have heard of many different connections of sleep to neurological disorders and neurodegenerative disorders. And some of this becomes in question, which came first, the bad sleep or the neurological condition. But we're seeing that poor sleep may be a risk factor for some of these even. Alzheimer's, approximately 15% in that population may have their memory issues because of their sleep problems that they had earlier in life.
Yeah, and you hear about beta amyloid, which is a particular type of protein deposit that happens in Alzheimer's disease. So we know that lymphatic system that's active at night is one of the ways that your body tries to clear those proteins so that they're not depositing where they shouldn't be. But it's not even just Alzheimer's. We see lack of sleep or too much sleep increasing the rates of stroke, having an effect on Parkinson's disease. And we also see sleep really impacting outcomes in patients that deal with multiple sclerosis and definitely with migraine headache.
Yeah, if anyone has dealt with migraine headaches, you know that lack of sleep is a trigger because you've experienced it when you've had those stressful times and you have not been sleeping well, that you can almost predict, hey, one is coming. That is because sleep is critical.
What about you, Sarah? I have definitely found myself putting my keys in the refrigerator or doing something like that when I have not gotten enough sleep.
I think we talk about mom brain and just the difficulties after having a baby. Some of that is hormonal, 100%, the shifts that you're having, but it's also a time that many women are very sleep deprived, like significantly. With my first, I had the craziest sleep deprivation that I've ever had, And the things that I did and the things I was incapable of doing was just mind-blowing.
Yeah,
It was
really
like
is.
I found things in the wrong place. That is a common one. Or simple tasks. I was like, do I know how to do this? It was just the processing wasn't present. The other thing is just trying to learn something new feels almost impossible. It's not there.
Yeah. They've even shown people that pull all-nighters, they're not able to do as well, even if they just slept for 90 minutes to let that learning set in and make those memories and connections. They do better on their test than not sleeping at all.
I am proof of that. I think I've done a side-by-side trial on myself in those scenarios, trying to do the all-nighter, take a test, and then doing it with some sleep. I'm pretty sure every single time I had sleep, I did better. Looking back and now reflecting, getting better sleep or longer sleep is my mood is so much easier to manage when I have adequate sleep. So that's one of those things when you feel like you're taking away from your sleep and I can get by. Yes, I can do my job. I can make all these things happen, but I just feel like my mood was not as stable when I was not getting enough sleep.
Yeah. And there have been many studies on multiple mental health conditions, but too little sleep is associated with major depression, bipolar disorder, seasonal affective disorder, PMS, and PTSD. So if you have had issues with any of those things, you really need to take a look at your sleep and make sure that you are doing the best you can for that.
Yeah, and the sleep is a part of the treatment for all of these that you just mentioned because it's going to help with the management of that. And if you're someone that deals with anxiety, when you are not getting enough sleep, that is something that is really exacerbated with your emotional state. And it's going to be harder to cope with stressors and whatnot if you are not getting enough sleep. The hard part here is many people who deal with anxiety also deal with insomnia. That's why we're going to talk about that a lot in our upcoming shows and how to manage that. But it can be a really vicious cycle of your anxiety is up, you don't sleep, your anxiety is up even more, and it just exacerbates it. So it's really trying to get on top of it and getting that sleep back in check so then you can also get the anxiety back in check.
Yeah, I think you're either one of two people. You either look at the bed and you're like, oh, yes, I'm ready to get in and go to sleep. Or a lot of people that struggle with sleep look at the bed and they suddenly feel anxiety, feel like, oh, here we go. How's my battle going to be tonight? And yeah, it's a terrible, vicious cycle. The biggest thing I notice with my mood and sleep is when I don't get enough sleep, I can definitely see a difference in my patience with my kids.
Oh, absolutely.
And tolerance of like loud noises.
Yes, or just inconveniences in general.
Traffic.
You're just, right, like road rage is definitely impacted by sleep. You just want to ask someone, did you just come off a night shift? I think you might have. But we all know this, and many people realize that, but we have to make sure we prioritize it so you can fix it.
One system that most people don't think about sleep interacting with very much is your cardiovascular system. So we know that at night, sleep is going to lower that sympathetic tone, that kind of fight or flight tone that you have in your body. It's going to lower your blood pressure. It's going to increase your perfusion, your blood flow getting to all of your peripheral tissues, and it's going to increase your stamina and cardiovascular recovery time.
And we've seen this in patients who have sleep apnea and it's not well controlled. That is something that could be making their blood pressure difficult to control as well. So it's always critical for those patients who have difficult to control blood pressure is doing a screening for possible sleep apnea, depending on their symptoms, because it has such an impact.
Yeah, and it even goes so far as having an impact on your cholesterol, the cells that line your blood vessels, and inflammation that leads to early atherosclerosis, which is the plaques that can clog up your arteries. There's differences in different studies, but I see anywhere from a 20 to 48% increase in rates of heart attack in people sleeping less than 7 hours.
Wow.
Which is crazy
Yes,
to think about.
yes. And consistent sleep of less than 5 hours per night is linked to 2 to 3 times higher risk of just getting coronary artery disease over time. And we've seen a higher risk of cardiovascular mortality for this population as well. So there is plenty of evidence to show us that getting adequate sleep is important for our cardiovascular health. We spend a lot of time talking about nutrition. We spend a lot of time talking about physical activity, but this bucket needs to be right up there with those two.
And really, even when you think about some of the medications we use to reduce chances of heart attack and stroke, which are both impacted by sleep, some of those are not these numbers. So, we use medicines that don't even work as well as sleep as far as reducing your risk. But ideally, you're doing all of the things. But if you can't do all of the things, think about sleep. Can you make your sleep better to help improve your cardiovascular risk?
One that I do think has gotten more publicity here recently is the importance of metabolic health and healthy sleep, just because of many different things out there on social media. But to touch on that is getting enough sleep and good quality sleep is going to help lower cortisol levels. It's going to help you manage your stress, and it's going to impact your blood glucose levels. This is something that we can see in real time.
Even just a couple nights of poor sleep affects your body's sensitivity to insulin. And so you hear a lot about insulin sensitivity these days, and we want to do things to help improve our sensitivity to insulin. One of those things is sleep.
For people that wear continuous glucose monitors, whether they have diabetes or they don't, anyone that's wearing those, they are able to see what a poor night's sleep does to their blood glucose. And it's something that is just so eye-opening for many, because you focus so much about what am I eating? What am I eating? I want to control my blood glucose. But then they realize how big of an impact sleep does, and they haven't spent any energy on trying to fix that.
We also know it affects the hormones that are involved in our appetite. So when you get poor sleep, you have lower levels of leptin, which is our hormone that tells us that we're full and we can stop eating. And we have higher levels of ghrelin, which is our hormone that tells us we're hungry. I always remember that by you're hungry and grr, yeah. And you can see this yourself. I know I had a bad night's sleep a couple of weeks ago, and that morning I was dying for some bread, and that's not something I normally eat in the morning. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want some bread this morning.
No, I have experienced this. This was like my life in residency, is when I would have like really poor sleep or a stint of nights where I wasn't getting as good sleep. I just craved 2 a.m. tots at the hospital. And this was not something I normally would eat on a regular basis, but you sleep deprived me, and that is the only food I could think about, was just these intense cravings. And it truly was related to that sleep. Yeah. That really poor sleep just made me crave it so bad.
I think every resident craved the hospital tater tots in the middle of the night. So understanding how much of an impact sleep has on your blood glucose, you can think about your risk of diabetes. And there have been multiple studies showing the tie of increased risk of diabetes with lack of sleep. And so getting less than 6 hours a night is going to increase your risk of type 2 diabetes anywhere from 25 to 40%. So that's huge.
And mentioning shift workers, as we both were as residents, those disrupted sleep patterns put you at higher risk for diabetes as well, anywhere from 35 to 60% higher risk of diabetes. That is substantial.
And a twofold increased risk in obesity. So realize sleep is affecting your heart health and your metabolic health. And a lot of people spend so much time and energy trying to lose weight and forget how important this particular bucket is.
Agree. And last week we talked about the pediatric population, and growth hormone is primarily released at night during sleep. And this is super important for kids, and why an emphasis is on getting good quality sleep, because that's when a lot of this is happening.
They're growing so fast, so they definitely need sleep to have their brains and bodies grow and develop like they should. But growth hormone is important for us as adults as well. And it's really critical in our tissue repair and renewal of our musculoskeletal system at night. So growth hormone is important even as you get older.
And I know testosterone is a hot topic and trying to get those levels higher. And
nobody wants low T.
Nobody wants low T. But we do know that you're going to have lower levels of testosterone when you have reduced sleep as well. So that is something to consider if that is something you're worried about.
And I think one that most people probably can recognize a little bit is the impact on their immune function with lack of sleep. When you have poor sleep, your immune system functions less. You get less renewal of these natural killer cells and T cells, and you also have a dysregulation in your cytokines and how your immune system reacts to those cells. So you have fewer of them, and then how sensitive your body is to them and reacts is impaired as well. I think everyone can recall a time where they were not sleeping well and got a cold.
All the time. Like it's one of those things now. I'm just like so in tune to it. If one of my children gets sick, the first thing I was like, ooh, I need to get more sleep. I need to be able to fight this off if it comes my way, because I know it's one of my best tools that I have to fight it off if I'm getting enough sleep after the exposure.
This was a huge one I saw the difference in when I went from my 5.5-hour phase of sleep to 7.5. I think I would say I probably pick up half of the number of colds per year now than I did when I was sleeping that way.
I second that. It makes a huge difference.
So if you do not like being sick, prioritize sleep.
Also, when you're trying to recover from being sick, is making sure that you are doing your best to prioritize sleep so you can get over the illness as well. This is one thing that always drove patients crazy in the hospital, and I agree. And there has been movement of trying to decrease sleep disruptions when you're sick and in the hospital. Of all people that need to be getting the best sleep, sometimes they get the worst sleep. But we have shown that, and many hospitals are trying to decrease those disruptions in order to prioritize sleep so you can heal and get better.
And sleep is also important in how our immune system keeps us protected from cancer. We consistently have cells in our body that start turning into what we call dysplastic cells, meaning they're a cell that could replicate and become a cancer. And our body is wonderful at recognizing these and getting rid of them. When we don't get enough sleep, we are not as effective at recognizing these cells and keeping them from multiplying.
There has even been some correlation for possible sleep disruption linking to many different cancers like breast cancer, endometrial cancer, prostate, colorectal cancer, AML. Again, these are correlative studies, but it does show that this can be an impact in your overall ability to fight off cancer.
Just another reason to start prioritizing that. And this is a short list. We could go on and on about some of these impacts, but we wanted to give you an idea of the different systems in your body that it affects. And I think just more and more research is coming out each year about how sleep impacts these different systems. And I think we're only going to see more evidence supporting the importance of sleep in managing your health. We wanted to shift focus now and talk about things you might be doing throughout the day that might be impacting your sleep.
First, our favorite topic, nutrition. What you eat really can impact how you sleep. And I know that this is something that is hard to balance, because if you're getting poor sleep, like we mentioned, you're going to be craving. You're hungry. Like you're fighting against those hormones. You're going to be craving more carbs. But we do see less high quality sleep in those that are eating simple carbs right before bed.
And so this was something I was definitely guilty of. You may have heard me mention this in other episodes, but I struggled with snacking at night, and it was typically on goldfish, pretzels, crackers, just things we had around in our house. And I kept thinking that I just was waking up all the time in the middle of the night because I was used to hearing my kids monitor or something, and I thought I'm just used to waking up. And then once I stopped doing that, I saw, oh, actually, that stopped too.
Magic.
So it's incredible. If you're eating those kinds of just sugary or simple carbs at night, and then you go to sleep, you're going to get a rise in your blood sugar, and then you're going to crash just like you would if you ate that during the day, and then you feel that really tired feeling afterwards. And that rise and crash is going to wake you up, and it's going to disrupt your sleep cycle.
Another thing is when we eat late, and the types of foods that we eat can impact reflux. And reflux is something that wakes up a lot of people from sleep or makes it difficult for them to fall asleep. And so just being cognitive of that and trying to change your overall dietary habits, you can reduce your reflux a lot by paying attention to the types of foods that you eat. Some people are really impacted by tomato-based products or onions and garlic or things that have carbonation, or believe it or not, some people are sensitive to chocolate. I know that's a sad one, but there are many different things, not just eating late, but also the types of food that you may have at dinner that can impact your reflux at night, which then impacts your sleep. So really making sure you're doing what you need to manage those symptoms so then you can actually get good sleep.
And so really we'd encourage you to just pay attention and maybe do some experimenting on yourself and see if you have a higher carb dinner, does that seem to affect how you sleep? Do you do better if you eat your carbs earlier in the morning and do higher protein type dinner? If you do have to have a snack before bed, watch what the difference is if you reach for crackers versus if you go for a handful of nuts, and pay attention to how your sleep responds to those. Once you figure out what works well for you, go back and really think about meal prepping, think about planning things out, because that's going to help you be successful to eat what you want to eat that you know is going to help your sleep.
And if that's something that you're struggling with and figuring out how to do meal prep, I know we've done a show before. Back in December, we did Lean Into Meal Prep with Lean Feast owner Collins Youngblood. And Lean Feast is a great option where you can get meals that are just full of whole foods and make it very easy on you to do that. And the great thing is, and I just wanted to update our listeners, is Lean Feast now has an app that makes ordering even easier for you. He has really simplified the whole process. So if you are having stressful weeks and meal prep is something that you can't get done, please check out the new Lean Feast app and give it a try, because I used it last week and it is so simple and so easy and lots of options that if you're having those crazy weeks, you can lean into having someone help you, and it makes a big difference. And overall, eating good whole foods is going to help you sleep better too.
Whole foods really makes a difference. But again, just pay attention to yourself, look at yourself as an experiment and see how you do best. The other thing that makes a huge difference in sleep, and Sarah, I know you feel like this made a big difference for you, is exercise.
Agree. If I am getting regular exercise, it helps me fall asleep at night. I'm someone that always struggled with the falling asleep aspect. I could stay asleep, but I had trouble falling asleep. When I'm consistent with exercise, I can just lay down, head hits the pillow, I'm out. That is because exercise helps improve sleep quality. It's going to help with your circadian rhythm. It's also something that if you are dealing with a lot of stress is a good stress management tool. If you have a lot of stress going on in your life, and then sometimes when you try to relax at night and you've done nothing to manage that stress, that's when everything fills your brain, and then now you can't sleep either. And so that's not going to help managing your stress. So it's something where I've leaned into exercise and had great success in helping my sleep.
Exercise is a great outlet for stress. And then if you are exercising, you need sleep to let your muscles recover, and so you're ready to go again the next day. So sleep's important also for recovery from that exercise. And then you just need to figure out the best timing for you. Some people, if they're exercising close to bedtime, within 90 minutes before bed, it may keep them from sleeping. But I know many people that exercise after they get their kids down and still seem to fall asleep fine.
It's one of those things. We can talk about what works for the majority, but test it out and see what works for you. If you have picked up an evening exercise routine and then suddenly are struggling to fall asleep, be sure you're making that connection, because that may be what caused it. But if it's not, that's okay.
One thing that people like to go to thinking that it will help with sleep is alcohol. Drinking alcohol does help you calm down and can calm anxiety, especially if you're one of those people that has your mind racing as soon as your head hits the pillow. But it actually leads to worse sleep. So it's going to disrupt that REM sleep, and it causes more sleep fragmentation. So you're going to wake up more and not have as great of a quality of sleep if you're drinking alcohol.
That is one that I know that many patients talk about when we're working on reducing alcohol, is how they didn't realize that the alcohol was what was causing them to wake up in the middle of the night. But as soon as they had a reduction in their alcohol use, they suddenly were able to sleep through the night. And it's also something that for women that are perimenopausal or menopausal, is your sleep is already impacted a lot in that stage of life. Then you throw a lot of alcohol in the mix, and it's only going to exacerbate those symptoms. So if you are a woman in that stage of life, it's really a time that you want to be working on reducing alcohol more than ever to help get that good quality sleep.
And really thinking about timing-wise, when should you stop drinking before bed? Studies have shown even drinking in the morning still has some impact on your sleep. But basically, the farther from bedtime that you can have your last drink, the better. And typically recommend trying to have no alcohol for 3 hours before bed to have the lightest impact on your sleep.
Another big topic that everyone knows, but sometimes is hard to adjust, is caffeine. Caffeine blocks adenosine, which is a neurotransmitter that builds up in the brain throughout the day and makes you feel sleepy. And what happens, we get, again, in one of those cycles. I'm tired, so I drink more caffeine, and then I've had more caffeine, so I don't fall asleep at night. And this is really one that you have to be very careful, because before you know it, you are drinking caffeine up until dinner time, and that's truly making a huge impact by the time you're ready to go to sleep at night and falling asleep, as well as helping you relax and get good quality of all your different sleep cycles. So you really need to pay attention to that timing of when you should have the last caffeine of the day. And that's not the same for everybody.
It is not. In general, it's thought that the half-life of caffeine is 5 hours. And what that means is if you drank a large cup of coffee, 5 hours later, you would have half of the caffeine in you still from drinking that 5 hours before. And then if you think about 5 hours after that, you've reduced it by half again. So even if you're having coffee about 10 hours before bed, you've still got about a quarter cup of that coffee's caffeine in your system when you're trying to fall asleep. So it's something to definitely pay attention to. And you might be someone that metabolizes it slower, meaning you probably need to stop drinking coffee even earlier. Or you might be someone that is able to metabolize that a little bit faster, and you might be okay with that 2 p.m. coffee.
Yeah, this is one you cannot compare yourself to friends or your spouse or whatnot, because everybody is different on this, on how they metabolize it. I know I'm one that is only in the morning and then I'm done. My husband can still have it in the afternoon and still be able to fall asleep. So you really have to do personal experiments to figure out what your threshold is and where you need to stop.
And just realize that there's different amounts of caffeine and things. Like I know for me, I like to brew my own coffee at home, and I'm cheap, so I don't usually like to buy coffee out, but I think there's a little bit less caffeine in that. And so I can have a cup of coffee at home 12 to 1-ish and still be okay. But I know I couldn't go drink like a Red Bull at 1 o'clock.
I can never drink an energy drink, period, without getting the shakes.
Those energy drinks have even more caffeine. So if you're drinking something that's really high in caffeine, you need to be even more careful about doing that earlier if you don't want it to impact your sleep.
And something that I always talk about, because this is hard. Say you've gotten in that cycle and your caffeine has just stretched into the evening and it's a habit and you're really trying to pull back. It's something that can really trigger headaches if you cut back too quickly. So one way to work on that and progress backwards is to start doing half and half, because that's a great way, only having half regular coffee, half decaf, and then slowly trying to get to that afternoon coffee being a decaf, and then you're edging your caffeine backwards slowly, because again, you do not want to have that withdrawal headache that comes from major changes in caffeine. So be cognitive of that. If that's something that you're working on and maybe you've noticed more frequent headaches, you might need to take it backwards slowly.
The other thing that a lot of people use to help feel more alert during the day is nicotine. And we used to just think about nicotine in the form of cigarettes, but now we know a lot of people are vaping with nicotine, and a lot of people are using those nicotine pouches or nicotine gum. Even people that aren't usually tobacco users are using these nicotine products to just help feel more alert during the day.
It's been shown to delay sleep onset, cause less REM sleep and deep sleep, and just have more awakenings in general. So really it's doing nothing positive for your sleep.
There's lots of reasons we could go into why cigarettes and vaping have detrimental effects on your health, but even these pouches and gum are going to keep you from getting restorative sleep, and hopefully we've convinced you in the first half of this episode that is important.
Another bucket that is talked about way more today is THC or marijuana, because many people may use that as a way to cope with anxiety and help them fall asleep, just like they may have used alcohol to do the same. But it also causes disruption in REM and deep sleep and puts you at risk for more nighttime awakenings.
And so with THC, with marijuana, you may find that you can get to sleep more easily in the beginning. A lot of the problem with marijuana and sleep is that people very quickly develop a tolerance to it. And so then they need more and more marijuana to fall asleep. And then, especially when they get to these higher doses, then that's when we see even more disruption in these sleep cycles. They start having more disrupted sleep. They keep using more, and then they may get to a point where they try to stop and they can't, because when they try to stop, then they get this rebound insomnia. A lot of people experience really vivid dreams or nightmares and can feel really restless. And this can last for weeks. So it can be really difficult to try to stop if you have been smoking marijuana to sleep.
It's one of the reasons that a lot of people start to lean in on CBD. That seems to help some with nighttime anxiety and falling asleep without the same disrupting effects. But that is an industry that is so hard to understand what is going on with the products that you receive, that it's a dangerous area to experiment with.
Yeah, I think there's more and more studies coming out looking into this, because it does seem like CBD can still give you those anti-anxiety effects and help with falling asleep without the tolerance and without the disruption. But yeah, you may get a product from one company and it's twice as much as a product from another company, and you may not be getting what you think you're getting because it isn't regulated. So you really need to be careful with CBD if that's something you're considering.
And one that everyone knows, but everyone struggles with, is screens and light that we're exposed to before bedtime. We'll talk about circadian rhythms more in later shows, but we know that our body, to help regulate our circadian rhythm, needs that early morning sunlight, and it needs darkness at night. And when we start exposing our body to different types of light at the wrong time of day, it gets confused, which it makes sense. It's used that for years and years as a way to regulate sleep before we had even alarm clocks. It's just something that in today's world is very challenging.
You really want to try to get those screens off as early as possible. And if you can go around and after dinner, you start dimming the lights in your house if you can, or just turning fewer lights on. Anything you can get your body to just get used to. Okay, it's starting to get dark. We're getting closer to bedtime. A lot of people use the blue light blockers. Have you ever used those, Sarah?
I have not, actually, but I do know some people use them to try to help.
You've got to keep in mind, too, if you're laying in bed and you're scrolling on your phone and you're looking at social media, that may be how you're choosing to unwind. But you're getting all that blue light in your eyes. And so your brain is getting the signal that we're in the middle of the day. It's not time for sleep. So it's really hard to go from scrolling on your phone to just going to bed.
Paying attention to the lighting in your house and trying to dim lights as you're leading up to bedtime can be helpful, specifically when you're dealing with shift working and you have no control over the outside lights. You need to really pay attention to what's going on inside. So light does matter.
And blue light in particular, we know suppresses melatonin. So if you lean to those more red tones of light, that's going to be less harmful to your sleep cycle.
Now, the one that I had to adjust more than anything before I could fix my sleep was changing how my evenings looked. Totally guilty of working up until bed, on my laptop, finishing notes, closing it, and then immediately trying to fall asleep. That just doesn't work. And that's because we're asking our brain to be on full work mode and then immediately shut off and go to sleep. That's not a very practical thing to expect our brains to do. And then laying in bed, worrying when would I fall asleep, because I'd already worked too late and I was cut into my time, and then I started that bad cycle. And so this is why it's really important to give yourself a wind down routine. And sometimes that can be really hard depending on what's going on in your life or what's going on with work. So even if you're starting and giving yourself at least 15 minutes and then trying to build that up to 30 minutes, ideally trying to get an hour wind down before bed, sometimes that's not doable, but doing something that lets your brain know, hey, it's time to relax. We can stop thinking about all these different things from the day and start relaxing for sleep.
And you need to be careful too, what you include in that. If you're someone that gets really worked up or passionate about the news, you definitely need to not look at the news in that time before bed. So I would say to most people that have, let's say, average 10 p.m. bedtime, you really should not be looking at the news or anything else that's going to work you up after 8 o'clock. Even your schedule, like think.
I was getting ready to go there. I was like, something that I have had, my husband does not have the problem of falling asleep talking about these things, but I had to put a boundary in and be like, we cannot talk about schedules right before we fall asleep. We have to do it way before. Like, we're going to talk about the next day. As soon as the kids have gone to bed, we're going to talk about it then, because then I have that time before I'm trying to fall asleep to process it all. Because if I do it right before sleep, or we talk about something significant that happened the day right before I'm supposed to fall asleep, my brain will not let me go to bed. And then I'm just up and I'm trying to process it. So I always encourage people, if you have something, on your mind or you're needing to plan, try to do that before. Don't do your relaxing thing, right? And then think about it before you go to sleep. Do it ahead of time. That gives your brain time to process, and then you'll be able to relax and go to sleep. And that's made a big impact for me.
One other thing with lifestyle that you don't have as much control over, but can make a big impact on your sleep, is just being a parent. And so just thinking about how doing things with your kids and how their sleep routine impacts yours, and maybe how you have your monitor and things. I'm hoping that Dr. Wetzler has some advice for us on this next week. But for me, I had to eventually just turn down the volume on my baby monitor, because every single little move they made would wake me up.
I think I went from like a 4 bar, and then as Alex is a baby, I'm like at a 1. But I realized I needed to do that, and everything was going to be okay. And I know that's hard when you're a new parent, but over time I was able to do that. And it made a difference, because I didn't have all the sounds that woke me up regularly, like every little cough or whatnot.
And then your kids get older, and that definitely helps with your sleep when they're sleeping better. I know I have found, for me, because I read with my daughter every night, and so after she's read to me for a while, I feel much more calm. And so that's really become the beginning of my wind down routine. So see if you can incorporate that with yours, because if you're already calm, like after you've put your kids to sleep, see if you can go on to bed, and then you can get up earlier if you want to.
Yeah, and making that shift to doing things when you've had that great sleep, instead of trying to push through the day when you're already tired and knock things out. Sometimes just getting the sleep then is the better answer.
So if you think about it, if somebody was on TikTok, and I don't have TikTok, but
tell me about TikTok, Kitty, since you're so well versed in it.
But I know a lot of people look at it. If someone was on TikTok and said, I have this product that will lower your weight, decrease your risk of diabetes, decrease your chance of having a heart attack or stroke, decrease your chance of having dementia, decrease cancer risk, decrease the chance that you're going to get sick, and improve your mood, improve your patience with your family, improve your ability to enjoy life and feel good and think and understand and learn, you would say, okay, how much is it? I'm ready. Like,
you name the price, I'll take it.
Yeah. And what's great is you have access to this tool for free. There's no copay. There's no prior authorization from insurance. It's just something that we have all let slip under the radar as far as importance to us in our life. And hopefully you can think about this today and really think about, are you getting the most out of your sleep that you can?
Just as a note, because there are times in your life that this can be very challenging to get the ideal like 7 to 9 hours. But even if you can improve your sleep by 15 minutes, 30 minutes, each of those count. Just the same as we talk about exercise and do what you can, take those small steps, they still make a difference. This is the same way with sleep. So if, hey, I can get 15 more minutes of sleep, I want to go on to bed instead of doing some other tasks that I just want to be able to check off, that is having a bigger impact in your overall health. So please do as much as you can in the time frame that you're allowed.
And even just thinking about, can I stop caffeine a little bit earlier? Can I stop my nightly glass of wine and look at how what I'm eating for dinner affects my sleep? Just making some little changes like that to improve the quality of sleep you're getting is going to serve you really well in the long run. We'd love for you to really just take note of your sleep over the next week, because next week...
Let's make it a challenge. We haven't done a challenge in a while.
Oh, yeah, good
so,
idea.
Yes, let's actually take notes on our sleep. And if you do any of these different changes that we mentioned, paying attention to the impact on how you slept that night and taking notes. So we're putting a challenge back out there, guys.
Because we are hoping Dr. Wetzler can really give us all the information we need on how to optimize this bedtime routine, how to optimize light, how to deal with our overactive brains that can happen at night that are keeping us from sleeping. So if you have taken some time to note what you're dealing with next week, hopefully you can get more out of what he has to say.
So that will conclude our first episode on sleep. And if you like what you heard, please be sure to share this episode with your friends and family like us, as well as if you have other ideas for topics or feedback on any of the topics we've done, please click send a text and let us know what you think.
Good night.